You can't handle the truth, so I'm just gonna lie. Welcome to the Heaven's Metal Podcast. I'm making a video podcast today because it's like February 28th. It's not leap year. It's the last day of the month. And basically, I need to make a video because I haven't made one in so long. And Pastor Bob has threatened me that he's going to send some of his goons to break my legs if I don't post a video soon. And, you know, I go to this church in the Austin area called Celebration, and Pastor Joe Champion, the son of an NFL coach, which is awesome because he brings up football a lot. One thing he does is he tells these whopper lies all the time, and he doesn't say, I'm kidding. He just lets it fly like it's true. So Pastor Bob is not sending goons to break my legs. I don't even know if he has goons working or volunteering for him. But anyway, so I'm making a podcast about the Jesus Revolution movie. I'm just trying to cash in on all this hoopla and publicity. That's a whopper lie. But I do want to talk about it because got to experience some cool stuff. I came to the Lord in 1974, which was, I guess, the tail end and still kind of the middle of the Jesus movement. I don't know when you would say the Jesus movement fizzled out. I guess it started in about 69, maybe earlier. And in 76, it seems like it was still going pretty strong. But maybe it was right around that time, maybe 76. But my grandparents, Grandpa Gerald and Grandma Pearl, are from Kansas, and I've told this story before. They retired from working on the farm, and they moved to Southern California back in the early part of the 60s, I'm guessing. And he opened up a garage where he worked on cars and stuff in Anaheim, California. And one day he was talking to God, and God told him, I can't use you. And he's like, what? What do you mean you can't use me? You hate someone. And immediately my granddad knew who God was talking about because he knew the person he hated. And shortly thereafter, he booked a trip back to Kansas and reconciled with this guy. I think I heard from my aunt one time that it had something to do with somebody in the Methodist church, some sort of church hurt. You know, church hurt is one of the worst hurts. Yeah, church hurt. Those can be some of the hardest wounds to overcome because church hurt kind of means somebody on the inside, somebody you were vulnerable to or somebody you were close to hurt you. And hold on a second, I got to you. You had these expectations that, you know, you can trust the people in the church, and if they hurt you, man, it hurts. And there's a proverb that talks about the wounds of a friend, and it's tough to overcome that. But anyway, my grandparents were able to obey God because God was saying, hey, you hate somebody, and I don't want to use you with this hatred in your heart. So my granddad, you know, kudos to him. He booked a trip back to Kansas, reconciled with that dude, and when he came back, man, the ministry of working with young people and their lives flourished. And I documented all this in a song I wrote called GDP for Less Control. GDP stands for Grandpa's Dangerous Prayer, and told the story about that. If you want to resource that, go check that out. But yeah, my grandparents lived in Garden Grove, California. They held Bible studies in their house, and they were packed with teenagers, mostly high schoolers. One thing that was really cool about the Jesus movement and Calvary Chapel and Chuck Smith in particular is they did a really good job of reproducing ministry. It wasn't really a personality-based, focused ministry. They did a good job of deflecting the glory and attention to Jesus, you know, and God used somebody like that. God used King David. God used Saul. When people humble themselves, God elevates them. And of course, the perception can be from some people, hey, it's personality based, or look how big that person is, you know. When God uses you, you become a target for critics and people. Maybe that's a jealous root. I don't know. I don't really care. But anyway, it's really cool about the Jesus movement. And my grandparents, they went to those tent meetings at Calvary Chapel, which is held at the the old Maranatha Village Christian Bookstore location. I think that's where the first Calvary Chapel was. It kind of moved around Santa Ana, Costa Mesa area. And those places were packed out. And I ran into somebody. I was working with my wife in this Dave Ramsey financial ministry thing at my church. And we had like a table that we were leading. And one of the couples, the older couple, kind of my age, maybe a little bit older, said my name, Van Pelt. Are you related to Gerald Van Pelt? And I was like, when she was a teenager, she got rides to some of these Calvary Chapel meetings in my grandparents' station wagon and their pickup truck and stuff. So they took teenagers all around to these things. And so it's what a small world. It was cool to kind of bump into that again. But so many people considered my grandparents' family. People opened up. My granddad wrote a book called Teens Tell. And it was just a collection of a bunch of teenage stories. And I have that available too, by the way, just a random pitch for HM Press Books, a book my granddad wrote called Teens Tell. But they were kind of near the ground floor of where the Jesus movement exploded from, like ground zero, Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa. And it was so cool how that thing reproduced. And in 1972, my family was living in Dallas, Texas. And my grandparents drove with their little camper shell pickup truck and parked in our driveway. And they had a bunch of half a dozen or a dozen teenagers with them that stayed with them, that they were taken to this big event that Campus Crusade for Christ put on called Explo 72. And it was a big evangelism conference held in Dallas. All the people had wristbands and they would do street witnessing during the day. Every night, Billy Graham would speak at the Cotton Bowl, which was always packed. My dad got saved at that event, which was awesome. And I think on the Saturday, they had a big concert, Explo 72, which has been documented. And I went with my parents and family. I was 9 years old, saw Larry Norman, Chris Christopherson, and Johnny Cash, and a bunch of other bands were on the bill. And I want to say there was 200,000 people there. It was this huge area where all these freeways were being constructed, kind of met, and just people all over the grounds. I remember one of the teenagers that came with us, I heard that she was getting medical attention because somebody dosed her Coca-Cola. Some hippie, I'm presuming not a Jesus person, was dosing Coca-Cola with acid. And she had a bad trip and had to get some medical attention for that. It was one of my random memories. I just kind of tell these stories stream of consciousness sometimes, some of the things that I remember. Shortly after that, in the winter of 73, my family moved to Northern Virginia, and there was the Jesus movement was full blown up there too. And there was this big event called TAG, and a bunch of Christians from all over the Washington, D.C. area, mostly Northern Virginia, but maybe some from Maryland came down for this thing. And it was just packed out. It was in like a high school auditorium, just full of teenagers in love with Jesus, worshiping Jesus. Went to a couple of those and got to be exposed to that. I remember this one event at a church retreat that my church had, and there was this worship time in the evening, and at one point during the worship, it was like, and I'll say this, it was like the Holy Spirit was so thick, the presence of God was so thick you could almost cut it with a knife, because people were walking around in tears, hugging each other. We were just expressing love to each other. Love you, man. Love you, sister. Love you, brother. And it was all cool and just warming. And I always knew from that moment on that Christians were the happiest people on earth, because I saw it. I saw happiness and joy right in front of me. It was like, couldn't escape it. I remember going to Woodson High School for a class field trip. I was in elementary school at the time, or junior high. And this time I was in elementary, and some of the hippies were out in front of the school playing Frisbee with each other between classes and stuff. It was like full on what it was like in the late 60s and early 70s was, teenagers were this in-your-face demographic, and they were getting saved by the droves. I remember seeing Arthur Dollar, one of the guys in the group that day, and just tagging along with my parents at the training union classes. They went to this Baptist church called Calvary Hill Baptist Church on Route 236 in Fairfax. And it was just alive. It was full of the Holy Spirit and full of young people that were just in love with Jesus and just love to break open his word and stuff. And so I got to see that, be a part of that, and it was so cool. And so the Jesus Revolution movie, I finally got to see it over this weekend and loved it. I didn't cry as much as I thought I would because something about redemption, when somebody gives their heart to Jesus, or redemption stories in general, it tugs at my heart. I just feel joy just thinking, wow, another great story. And to put it simplistically, another one snatched from the fire, another one stolen from Satan, another one that's going to be in eternity with Jesus. And sometimes evangelism breaks down to that simplicity, just being, we are God's offspring, and he wants us, and he calls us. And when somebody comes to him, it's just such a beautiful thing. I can't help but weep sometime. Prior to going to see the movie, I saw some reviews online, heard some criticism about the movie, and I'm like, man, it just bums me out so much that we can often sometimes be so quick to criticize something. It's like when somebody, especially somebody in the body of Christ, puts their heart and soul or puts an effort to something and creates something, let's applaud them for it. Let's encourage them. Let's just not criticize them. Some of the critics that have voiced criticism over this movie, I could go through their good works, and I choose not to, but I can nitpick and find things wrong with what they created. So why do that? What is it? Sometimes criticism just really feels like grumbling and complaining. And I think God really had a problem with that when he was taking the people of Israel to the promised land and wandering in the desert. And the people that grumbled and complained, man, that did not endear them to God's heart and intimacy with the Lord. I think that that's kind of an error that we can make so easily. And so let's encourage our brothers and sisters when they do something that's good, that's right. And, if we have some insight, constructive criticism, maybe we can offer that in a way that's constructive, that's private, that goes to that person. And so one of the bents I've seen, like being the editor of Heaven's Metal and HM Magazine for many, many years, sometimes people would come to me wanting to get on a platform and express outrage or anger or concern about some sort of error and wanting to stamp out the people that were making the error or cancel them. Even way back then, it was kind of like and I was like, man, just chill out. When somebody has error, there's ways that the Bible gives us some instructions on how to deal with error. And getting all freaked out about it and going public about it, that's God's last resort. If you look at the Matthew 18 principle. And I remember Pastor Alan Rigg. Hey, Alan, if you see this, he's a Calvary Chapel pastor, and he's planting a new church in Santa Monica called Sola Church. So if you're in the area, check that out. I'm sure it's really good because Alan has a gift. He's touched by God. Anyway, he told the story one time about going to a Striper concert, and there was people picketing and protesting about the evils of heavy metal and Striper. And somebody in the line was like, "Smoke a joint, dude." And Alan laughed about that. And he told that very dangerous little story in a sermon. He says, "I don't advocate smoking marijuana, but the point was, relax, man. So if there's an error going on, and God's appointed you to be the fixer of the error, check that. Make sure that's a real valid calling that God's really given you, because you're bent out of shape over someone else's actions. And man, if you could just chill out and relax and give it to God. When somebody is harming other people, when there's let's just go to the extreme. When there's a wolf attacking and damaging and killing sheep, a call to action could be very appropriate. Depending upon the degree of damage, we could at least start with intercessory prayer and pray about that situation. Don't just jump in and get involved and make enemies and just voice your opinion. Man, another thought I had is about similar concept is the March for Jesus in the early 90s. It was a worldwide event. It was so cool. And the organizers, for anybody I volunteered to be a part and help and lead some of the worship dance choreography stuff. And the organizers the night before or a couple days before the event said, "Hey, this event is for the audience of one, Jesus Christ. We're all coming together, people from churches from all over, different churches, different denominations, and don't wear your pro-life t-shirt on Saturday. And I can imagine some people going, oh, why would we give up the fight, to defend the unborn, to stop the American Holocaust? Why don't we wear our shirts that day? Because we're going to have media attention. He goes, this is about Jesus. Leave your pro-life shirts. We all agree with you. And you're preaching to the choir here. We want to move and resist that evil in our age. But don't wear your pro-life shirts tomorrow. Let the focus be on Jesus. And I thought, man, I think that's God's heart and really good leadership, because, sometimes we can do the right thing or do something that's legitimately right, or we have biblical reasons to do something, but we're just out of touch with it. The timing is off. It's not the context to do something like that. So in the midst of the Jesus Revolution, go see the movie. It tells a story about this thing that happened that kind of had a ground zero in Southern California and spread all over the world. And Christian heavy metal and Christian rock was like a child of that and an offspring of that. And look at what happened in our world, in our scene. And so this is a way to kind of learn more about that and see the kindness and non-judgmental spirit that helped produce that and reproduce that and reproduce that and reproduce that and reproduce that. It was so awesome and cool. So there's my random thoughts on the Jesus Revolution. Nobody asked me to share this, so hit delete or just go on to the next video, but make some comments below if you want to join the discussion. God bless you. I'd like to join the discussion. I'm the guy that's been listening to Stryper in my car with a Worship at Full Volume sticker on it. And just wanted to go back to this whole thing about criticism. Why our generation, people like you and me, why we're criticizing something that's of God or something that might be something that's glorifying God. I remember those Stryper concerts in the early days, people using the one-way symbol. Jesus is the way. Tons of people in the crowd were putting one-way symbol, the one finger up in the air at Stryper shows, because they love Jesus. It was a move of God, and that kind of birthed this whole Christian heavy metal movement too. So just more food for thought as I go shopping.